I knew I was late the moment I saw the clock above the entrance. 10:07 a.m. presentation day. Professor Harper didn't tolerate delays. She called it a form of disrespect, and she meant it. By the time I pushed open the classroom door, everyone was already seated, the lights dimmed, and two students were midway through their slides. Her eyes met mine across the room. Still, sharp, no words needed. The kind of stare that didn't raise its voice but made you feel every syllable anyway. I sat in the back, quiet, invisible, or so I hoped. The rest of the class passed in a blur. I didn't even hear the presentations, just the low hum of the projector and the occasional tap of her heels as she moved between rows. When it ended, she announced grades would be based not only on content but punctuality. Then her voice cut through the chatter like glass. "Mr. Reed." A word. My stomach dropped. A few heads turned, some smirking. I nodded, pretending I wasn't dying inside, and packed my bag slowly, letting the rest of the students file out. When I reached the front, she was stacking papers with deliberate calm. Her hair was pinned up, like always, but a few strands had loosened during the class. Her blouse was tucked neatly into high-waisted trousers, not a wrinkle in sight. Everything about her screamed control. She didn't look at me right away. "I assume there's a compelling reason for missing your assigned time," she said. "There's not," I admitted. That made her glance up. Honesty. At last. I shifted on my feet. "I'll make it up. I just—" "No," she cut me off gently. "You won't make it up. The grade's recorded. But—" she paused, set the papers down. "You can stay." My brows lifted slightly. "Stay? I have time now. You can deliver your presentation to me." I hesitated. "Just us." She turned then, walking to the door. Without another word, she closed it softly behind me. The click echoed. Then she turned around, leaned against the door, and said it. "We'll call this a private lesson." My pulse ticked upward. Her tone wasn't suggestive, not exactly, but it wasn't neutral either. She walked past me and sat on the edge of the desk, crossing one leg over the other. "Well?" she asked. "You brought your notes, I assume." I fumbled to unzip my bag. "Yeah, I did. Sorry again for—" "You've already apologized. Now show me why I shouldn't fail you completely." It was hard to focus with her watching me like that. I pulled out my laptop and opened the file, scrolling to the first slide. My topic was body language in modern media, something she'd already lectured on a dozen times. I cleared my throat and began, stumbling over the intro. Her expression didn't change. A few minutes in, she interrupted. "Stop." I froze. "You're reciting, not presenting." I nodded slowly. "Right. I just—" She stood and walked toward me. "What did I say in the first week of class?" I thought for a second. "That delivery is as important as content." "And what else?" "Conviction is everything." She smiled faintly. "Exactly." She stepped closer. I smelled the faint citrus in her perfume, something precise and clean. She reached forward, adjusting the way I was holding the laptop. Her fingers brushed mine, just a second too long to be accidental. "You slouch when you're nervous," she noted. I laughed. "Awkward. Probably because I am." She tilted her head. "Shouldn't be. You have potential, but you bury it under apologies." I didn't know what to say. She moved past me again, walking back to her desk, and took a seat behind it. "Start over. And this time, say it like you mean it." I did. This time, my voice was louder, clearer. I paced a little like I'd seen her do. I used my hands. I didn't read. I spoke. And when I glanced up, her eyes were on me. Not just watching, but following, measuring. I finished out of breath. There was a pause. Then she said, "Better." I nodded. "Thanks, but not finished." She opened a drawer, pulled out a printed sheet. "This was your last essay. Do you know how it read?" "Badly?" "Not badly. Like someone hiding behind a textbook." She stood again, walked over, and handed it to me. The prompt was to analyze the use of silence in visual communication. You spent 3 pages describing camera angles. I looked down at it. Red ink everywhere. "You avoided the real topic," she said. I guess I didn't know what to say. She leaned slightly on the desk again. "Or maybe you knew, but didn't want to say it." Her words landed heavier than they should have. "I'll give you a new prompt," she added. "Right now. You'll write it here. With me." I blinked. "Now? Now." She walked over to the whiteboard and uncapped a marker. In small, precise letters, she wrote, "What do you hide when you're being watched?" I stared at it. "That's your topic," she said. "For what class?" I asked. Her lips curved just slightly. "For this one." I nodded slowly, heart pounding harder than it had during the presentation. And when I sat back down at the desk, I realized I hadn't even opened the laptop, just the folder in my head. I stared at the words on the board longer than I meant to. "What do you hide when you're being watched?" It didn't feel like an essay prompt. Felt like a challenge. Professor Harper sat back behind her desk, silent, waiting. Her legs were crossed, one heel gently swaying in the air. She didn't speak, just watched. I opened the laptop again, the screen glowing far too bright in the dim classroom. My fingers hovered over the keys. I typed a title, then deleted it. Typed something else. Deleted that too. "I don't know where to start," I admitted finally. She didn't move. "Start where it's uncomfortable." I glanced up. "Is that your advice to everyone?" "No. Most students are afraid of uncomfortable." "You're not." I blinked. "How do you know?" Her brow rose just slightly. "Because you stayed." The sentence hung in the room longer than necessary. I looked back at the screen, the cursor blinking like a metronome. My chest felt tight, but not from panic. From attention. She continued, her voice low. "You wrote an entire essay about silence without ever mentioning fear, desire, or control. All 3 are the language of silence. But you dodged them." I swallowed. "Maybe I didn't know how." "No," she said. "You knew. You just didn't want me to read it." She stood and walked slowly to the board again, reading her own question. "You ever get the feeling someone sees more of you than they're supposed to?" she asked quietly. I nodded before I could think. She turned to face me. "You write like someone who sees everything but says nothing." I tried to respond. Failed. "So say it," she added. "This time write it for yourself. Not for me. Not for the grade. Not for a rubric." I started typing. The first few lines were rough, wooden. But then something shifted. I stopped trying to sound smart and started just answering. Not academically, personally. The moments when I held back what I actually wanted to say. The ways I adjusted myself around people depending on what they expected. The things I never let anyone read in my face. Halfway through, I heard her move, the soft sound of her heels crossing the room. Then she was beside me, close enough that her perfume reached me again. She didn't say anything, just watched over my shoulder. "Does it make you nervous?" she asked after a moment. "What?" "Being watched while writing something honest." I nodded. "That's good," she said. "It means you're not performing anymore." She leaned over just slightly to see the screen better. Her hand rested on the desk beside mine, her fingers almost grazing my forearm. I could feel the heat of her skin without even touching it. Then she spoke again, softly. You write differently when you're not hiding. I turned slightly. She was close, closer than before. She didn't step back. Instead, she looked at me carefully, like I was part of the assignment now, like this was part of the lesson too. I wasn't expecting this, I said. She smiled faintly. Neither was I. Her eyes dropped for a second, just a flicker, and then back to mine. But I don't regret keeping you here. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. She stepped back slowly, giving me room to breathe again, and walked toward the windows. She adjusted the blinds halfway, letting in just a sliver of the cloudy afternoon light. The room dimmed around us. I used to hate silence, she said. In my early years teaching, I filled every pause with questions or notes or redirection. What changed? She turned, leaning against the windowsill. I realized the quiet parts were where students told the truth. Not in essays, in how they hesitated, where they looked, what they avoided. I looked down at the screen. I'd written 300 words already. That's what I'm doing now? I asked. She gave a small nod. You're hesitating less. There was another long pause. Then she stepped forward again, stopping just short of the desk. Stand up, she said. I blinked. What? Stand. Just for a second. Confused, I rose to my feet. She stepped around behind the chair and gently took hold of my shoulders. Posture, she said. You hunch when you think too much. Makes your voice small. Her touch was light but deliberate. She adjusted my shoulders slightly. Then her hands dropped, brushing down my upper arms as she stepped around in front of me again. Couldn't look at her. Not fully. Her voice was quiet now. You see how hard it is for you to hold eye contact? I did. I felt it. Why? Because it feels like too much, I said honestly. Her gaze didn't break. Exactly. But that's the point. That's where your writing lives. She moved back toward the desk and tapped the screen. Keep going. I sat back down slowly. She didn't return to her desk. She perched on the edge of mine instead, one leg crossed, her blouse lightly brushing my shoulder. I tried to focus on the keyboard. You're doing fine, she said. Her voice was lower now, less formal, almost familiar. Do you think I'm crossing a line? She asked, not looking at me. I froze. I don't know, I said quietly. She nodded slowly. Good. That means you're paying attention. I swallowed. Are you? Her head turned slightly. Always. The cursor blinked on the screen again, but I couldn't move my fingers. Not yet. She leaned just a little closer, enough that I could feel her breath when she said, So keep writing. Don't stop just because you're being seen. I kept typing, but the words started to blur. Her presence beside me was impossible to ignore. One part professor, one part something else entirely. The soft brush of her blouse against my shoulder, the rhythm of her breathing, the calm weight of her silence. It all pressed against the edges of my focus like a tide. Every sentence I wrote felt sharper. Not because of the assignment, because of her watching. After a while, she stood up without a word and crossed the room. She dimmed the lights even further, leaving only the warm glow of the desk lamp behind me. The room shifted instantly, no longer a classroom. Felt smaller, quieter, closer. When she turned back, she didn't return to her desk. She leaned against the edge of the whiteboard and crossed her arms. Read me what you've written so far, she said. I hesitated. Out loud. Yes, that's part of the exercise now. I swallowed. The cursor blinked at the top of the page. I scrolled back and began to read. My writing shifts when I know I'm being watched. I become careful, not in the way I construct sentences, but in the way I construct meaning. I stop saying what I feel and start asking what's safe. Her eyes didn't move. I continued, voice quieter. Sometimes I think I've forgotten what my real voice sounds like. Not the one I use for essays or for class. The one underneath. I stopped there. Her voice cut through the stillness. Why did you stop? That's where I paused in the writing. She nodded. But not where you paused in the thought. I looked up. How do you know that? Her expression was unreadable. Because you looked away when you said it. She walked toward me slowly, the quiet click of her heels swallowed by the carpet. When she reached my side, she didn't speak right away. Instead, she pulled a chair closer, turned it around, and sat across from me, closer than she had all afternoon. Her knees nearly brushed mine. Do you know what most students are afraid of? She asked. Grades, I guessed. She shook her head. Being seen. Not academically. Personally. I nodded. Do you know what I'm afraid of? She asked next. That made me pause. She answered for me. I'm afraid of seeing someone's truth and not being able to unsee it. Her eyes held mine then. Quiet. Steady. No smile. No mask. Are you telling me your truth right now, Mr. Reed? I felt heat rise in my chest. I think so. She leaned forward slightly. You think? Or you know? I hesitated. I know. Good. A pause. Then she reached forward and closed my laptop gently. I think we've done enough writing for today. I stared at the dark screen. But we haven't finished, I said. No, she said softly. We've just started a different part. She stood up slowly, walked to the board again, and erased the sentence she'd written earlier. The marker squeaked softly as the question disappeared. She turned back around and leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching me with a different kind of stillness now. You said earlier that it's hard to hold eye contact, she said. Yeah. And yet, here we are. I looked at her, and this time I didn't look away. There was something in her posture that shifted, something that moved her from instructor to woman in the space of a breath. The way she tilted her head, the way her eyes softened just slightly without losing intensity. She walked toward me again, slower this time. I've read dozens of your essays, she said, but none of them told me what I saw today. What did you see? You, she said simply. Another silence settled between us, dense and deliberate. Then she sat down beside me again, but this time not across from me. This time directly beside me, hip to hip. I'm not here to scare you, she said quietly. You're not. I'm here to push you. I know. She looked down at her hands for a second, then back at me. Most people live behind layers. Work, roles, masks. You included. And you? I asked. She smiled. I teach communication for a reason. So people can see through the masks? So I can, she said. That landed heavier than I expected. I want to ask you something, she added, voice lower now. Okay. She turned slightly, one leg brushing mine. Have you ever written something you were afraid someone would read? I nodded. Today. Good. Then came the moment I didn't see coming. She reached for my notebook, the one I'd barely used, and flipped to the first blank page. She held the pen out to me. Write one sentence. Just one. And don't filter it. I took the pen, paused. Then, without letting myself think, I wrote, I've wanted to know what it means when you look at me like that. I capped the pen. She read it. Once. Twice. Then she looked up. What do you think it means? She asked, voice just above a whisper. I didn't answer right away. She leaned in. I think it means, she continued. You already know. Her hand touched the edge of the notebook, just barely, but her fingers stayed there, close to mine. Say it, she said. Say the thing your essay won't. I opened my mouth, closed it. She waited. Then I looked directly into her eyes and said the words. I think you want me to cross a line. Her expression didn't change, but something in her breath did. She didn't confirm. She didn't deny. Instead, she leaned in a fraction closer, her voice like a thread between us. And if I did? I couldn't move, couldn't speak. So I didn't. I just held her gaze. And this time I didn't blink. The silence after those words was complete. No clock ticking, no hallway noise, just the air between us, charged, heavy, waiting. She didn't pull away, didn't lean closer either. She just stayed exactly where she was, watching me with the kind of stillness that wasn't passive at all. It was focused, a decision in the making. Then she stood up, slowly, as if every movement was deliberate. She turned away from me, walked to her desk, and placed both hands on its surface like she needed a second to think. I didn't plan this, she said quietly. I know. Her back was to me. This was supposed to be a warning, a lesson, about showing up, about responsibility. I stood too. I showed up. She looked over her shoulder at that, her expression unreadable. Yes, you did. I took a step forward. Just one. I meant what I wrote, I said. She turned fully now, her arms still crossed over her chest. Which part? All of it. But mostly, that I see the way you look at me. And I don't know if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. She took a breath, slow and controlled. You're not. That confirmation landed like thunder in my chest. She walked toward me again, closer than ever now. When she stopped, we were only inches apart. This shouldn't be happening, she said. But it is. A long pause. Then, finally, she reached out and took the notebook from the desk, flipped to the sentence I'd written. Her thumb brushed lightly over the ink. She handed it back to me and met my eyes. No grade, she said softly. Just truth. The lights hummed faintly behind us. I didn't move. Then something changed. A sound from the hallway, faint but clear. A door slamming shut at the far end of the building. Maybe another professor. Maybe a janitor. Professor Harper glanced toward the noise, then back to me. If you leave now, she said, her voice lower than before. This never happened. She paused. If you stay. Her eyes stayed on mine. You finish what you started. I didn't speak, but I didn't move either. She didn't smile. She didn't coax. She simply waited. Not as a teacher anymore. Not even as an authority figure. As a woman, standing in front of someone who had just told the truth, and was waiting to see what that truth would cost. My fingers tightened slightly around the notebook. I took one step forward, then another. She didn't stop me. I stopped just close enough to feel her breath again. I'm not your student anymore, I said. Not in this moment, she replied. And this moment is real? She nodded. I don't want to misunderstand what this is, I said. You haven't, she whispered. She reached for my hand then, softly, without pressure, and guided it to her desk, set the notebook down slowly. Her fingers lingered over mine. Then she said, Sit. I obeyed. She stood behind me for a long second, her hands lightly resting on my shoulders, grounding me. Not possessive, not instructive, just present. And then, in one slow motion, she stepped around and sat on the desk in front of me, knees nearly touching mine. Let me ask you something, she said, and answer honestly. I nodded. She tilted her head. Are you afraid of what comes after this? Yes. But you still want it? Yes. Her lips parted just slightly. Then here's the last lesson I can give you. I waited. You can't control what people think, but you can control what you choose to say. She leaned in slightly. So say it. I swallowed. Say what? She lifted the notebook, tapped the sentence I wrote. The next part. I looked down, then up. I want this, whatever this is. She didn't blink. Even if it's messy? She asked. Yes. Even if it complicates everything? Yes. She took a breath, let it out. Then she stood, walked slowly back to her desk, picked up a folder from the top. She turned to me with a look that was neither cold nor warm, just real. I'll mark you present for today, she said, and you'll pass the course. I nodded. Thank you. But this, she added, holding up the folder, isn't about school anymore. No, I agreed. It's not. She placed the folder gently back on the desk, walked to the door, rested her hand on the handle, paused, and then looked at me over her shoulder. If you want to come back next week, she said, don't knock. The door clicked softly behind her as she stepped into the hallway. I sat there for a long time, the lights dim, the room quiet, my heart louder than both. I picked up the notebook, flipped to the page. The sentence was still there. I've wanted to know what it means when you look at me like that. I turned to the next page. Blank. Waiting. Like the rest of the story.